For years, I told people to wait until 70. I said it clearly, confidently, the way you say something when you believe it completely. Wait as long as you can. The longer you wait, the higher your benefit. The math is straightforward. And for some of the people I gave that advice to, it was probably right. But for others, I'm not sure it was. The more I've looked at the real numbers, not the simplified version most people see, the more I've come to believe that wait until 70 is the most repeated piece of Social Security advice in America and one of the least examined. So today, I want to look at it honestly. Not to tell you when to claim, but to give you the full picture, the part that gets left out of the standard advice, so you can make a decision that actually fits your life. The argument for waiting is built on a real foundation. Claim at 62 and you receive a reduced benefit up to 30% less than your full retirement age amount. Wait until 70 and your benefit grows by 8% for every year past full retirement age. On a $2,000 full benefit, waiting from 67 to 70 adds roughly $480 a month permanently. The math looks convincing, but there's a number buried inside that math that most people never work out, and it's the one that actually tells you whether waiting pays off. It's called the break-even age. It's the age at which the total you've collected by waiting finally surpasses the total you would have collected by claiming early. For most people, that age falls somewhere between 78 and 82, depending on when they claimed. What that means in practice is straightforward. If you don't live past that age, waiting was the worst financial decision, not the better one. I'm not saying that to be grim. I'm saying it because it's a real calculation that belongs in this conversation, and it rarely is. The average American man who reaches 62 today has a life expectancy of around 82 years. The average woman, a few years longer. But those are averages, and your life is not average. If you have diabetes, heart disease, a family history of cancer, or simply a body that has been worked hard for 40 years, your personal break-even calculus looks different than the one built for a healthy 62-year-old in a brochure. The standard advice doesn't account for that. It should. And the break-even is just the starting point. Because there's an argument against waiting that almost never comes up, and it involves the money you don't collect while you're waiting. Every month you delay claiming is a month of benefits you don't receive. If you claim at 62 instead of 70, you collect 8 years of checks before someone waiting until 70 sees their first payment. On a benefit of $1,800 a month, that's over $170,000 that entered your account before the person who waited collected anything. Now, the higher benefit does eventually catch up, assuming you live long enough. But here's the question that doesn't get asked often enough. What if you didn't spend that money? What if you invested even a portion of it conservatively? The break-even age shifts. In some scenarios, it shifts significantly. The larger monthly payment you'd receive by waiting is competing against a growing invested balance, and the race is closer than most people realize. I'm not telling you the math always favors claiming early. I'm telling you the math is more complicated than the version you've probably been shown. If this is the kind of breakdown you want more of, the real numbers, the angles that don't make it into the standard advice, subscribe. And if this is raising questions about your own situation, put them in the comments. I read everything, and I'll answer what I can. Now let's talk about couples. Because the wait until 70 advice, when applied to a marriage, can go wrong in ways that are surprisingly specific. When two people are making this decision together, the calculation isn't just about each person's benefit in isolation. It's about the household and what happens to that household when one spouse dies. Think about this. A husband and wife, both in their early 60s. He earned significantly more over his career. The standard advice says he should wait until 70 to maximize his benefit. In isolation, that logic holds. But his benefit, once he dies, becomes her survivor benefit. She will collect it for the rest of her life. So the real question isn't just what's his highest monthly amount. It's what income does she live on for potentially 10 or 15 years after he's gone. For some couples, that framing leads to the same answer. For others, it changes everything. The age difference between spouses, the gap in their earnings histories, their respective health, who is statistically likely to outlive whom, all of these feed into an optimization that a single sentence of advice can't capture. Wait until 70 isn't wrong exactly. It's just incomplete. There's one more piece I want to cover, and it's the one that tends to make people uncomfortable because it involves something nobody can fully predict. The Social Security Trust Fund is projected to face a funding shortfall in the early 2030s. This is not a secret. It's published in the SSA's own annual reports. It doesn't mean Social Security is disappearing. Congress has adjusted benefits before and will likely do so again. But it does mean there is a real possibility of some form of benefit modification in the coming decade. A person who claimed at 62 has already collected years of full payments before any hypothetical policy change. A person who waits until 70 has collected nothing yet. Whether that risk belongs in your decision is entirely personal. But it's a real variable, and most advisors won't raise it because it's uncomfortable and uncertain. I'd rather you hear it and decide what to do with it than not hear it at all. The last thing I want to say is the one that gets skipped most often because it doesn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet. A lot of people who delay claiming until 70 do so while continuing to work jobs they no longer want, in bodies that are no longer young, because they feel like they have to in order to justify the wait. They are trading years of their health and freedom for a larger number on a monthly statement. I've seen people do this and reach 70 exhausted in declining health, finally receiving the benefit they waited for and no longer able to do the things they had in mind when they made that decision. The optimal claiming age is a financial concept. The optimal life is a different question entirely. If claiming earlier means you stop working a job that's wearing you down, spend more time with people you love, and live on somewhat less money, that is a legitimate decision. It just doesn't show up in the calculator. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not telling you to claim early. For many people, healthy, still working, with a spouse who depends on a higher survivor benefit, waiting until 70 genuinely is the right call. What I'm saying is that this advice is often delivered as though it's universal. And it isn't. Your break-even depends on your health. Your opportunity cost depends on what you do with the money in the meantime. Your household strategy depends on your specific marriage. And your comfort with political risk is your own business. This is a decision worth sitting with, not one worth rushing toward based on a rule of thumb that was designed for the average person, not for you. Subscribe if you want more of this. I cover the real mechanics behind Social Security decisions regularly, including the parts that tend to get simplified away. And leave your questions in the comments. Your situation is specific, and general advice only goes so far. I'll do my best to give you something useful. I'll see you in the next one.